Most large organisations these days do understand the need for content marketing, but I do think a lot of those companies are putting the cart before the horse in a way. Before investing in a content marketing program, it's important to first ascertain what success looks like. So whether it's boosting brand awareness, delivering lower funnel connections, or to be honest, as is usually the case, it's a combination of both. Once you've established what success looks like, then attention to turn to the audience. So who are we targeting and how do we want to engage with them? More often than not, the answers revolve around human-centric content that gets to the root of particular pain points or opportunities. I honestly believe this, but behind every product or service offering, there is a benefit to an end user, obviously, and it could be a banking solution that protects vulnerable customers against, say, fraud, for example, or providing high-speed broadband to remote parts of the world. The key is to ask the right questions of the subject matter experts within big companies to get to the bottom of the what and the why. Building trust with your target audience is really fundamental in terms of generating connection that will ultimately lead to acquiring and retaining customers, which is kind of what it's all about. And I think the best way to start building trust is obviously to first consider your audience's point of view. What's keeping them awake at night? What are the main challenges and opportunities facing their business? Once you've considered the audience's point of view, you can then start to develop relevant and insightful content that addresses those pain points. The temptation in the past has been to focus primarily on promotional messaging. What do we want to say? Rather than what do the audience actually want to hear?
Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode in the award-winning OnBase Podcast series. I'm Paul Gibson, and I'm excited today that I'm talking to Callum Brodie. He's Associate Director of Marketing at Firstsource Solutions. And today we've got a great topic. The name is Content with a Pulse. Callum, sounds like an exciting project. Looking forward to talking to it. Thank you very much for coming on the show today.
Thanks. Yeah, cheers. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Should be a good one. Okay, so it sounds like an interesting topic and very relevant for listeners. We'll get into that. But first, if you don't mind, just a quick, simple question, Callum. Can you walk us through your journey, where you are today, and what inspired you to focus on this particular topic?
Absolutely. Yes. I'll start from the beginning. So I was a journalist for the first 10 years of my career after finishing uni. Started off in local newspapers. So I started at my sort of hometown newspaper, which was the Slough Observer. And I cut my teeth on general news. So kind of everything from council meetings, Crown Court proceeding, all the way down to sort of village fetes, dog shows, everything in between, really. So I started in Slough, moved up to Grimsby, all the glamour spots, and a few other places in between, which was great fun, and I learned a lot. Having sort of experienced that, I then moved to London, where I sort of rose through the ranks at a B2B trade publication that focused on the general insurance market. Spent about sort of 5 or 6 years there and learnt a lot about sort of publishing at that level. Obviously quite a niche target audience, but a great market is the insurance market. And I really enjoyed my time there. After that, I helped run the news coverage for the UK's biggest consumer finance website, which is Money Saving Expert. And I worked pretty closely with Martin Lewis on quite a few high profile campaigns, which was a really unbelievable experience. Really thoroughly enjoyed that time. Did a lot of really good work that I feel kind of did help people. I left MSc kind of midway through 2017. And it's this point where my career kind of pivoted more towards brand journalism. So I joined a leading content marketing agency, which supported a number of global organizations in terms of kind of cutting through the noise with multi-format content that resonates with their target audiences. And I learned a lot there. Spent about 6 years at that agency. Kind of moved up the ranks there. In my current role, I'm part of the in-house marketing team at a company called Firstsource Solutions, which is a big global business process outsourcing company. I'm based in London. The company itself is, say, global in nature. So we've got big presence in the UK. We've got big presence in the US, in India, and other parts of the world. Among other things, my role includes delivering multi-format content, integrated campaigns, which are designed to drive brand awareness and lower funnel engagements across the various industry business units that we cater for here at Firstsource.
Excellent. What a varied and interesting background. I reckon that the journalism and the Martin Lewis, I think there's a whole another podcast we can get into that one.
Absolutely, yeah.
So with the title being Content with a Pulse, why in your mind do you think it's important for B2B organizations to maybe move away from traditional promotional content and focus more on, building that trust around your brand with an audience?
Yeah. So I think building trust with your target audience is really fundamental in terms of generating connection that will ultimately lead to acquiring and retaining customers, which is kind of what it's all about. And I think the best way to start building trust is obviously to first consider your audience's point of view. So what's keeping them awake at night? What are the main challenges and opportunities facing their business? Once you've considered the audience's point of view, you can then start to develop relevant and insightful content that addresses those pain points. And I think the temptation in the past has been to focus primarily on promotional messaging. So, what do we want to say rather than what do the audience actually want to hear? What do they want to know? And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't weave in the more promotional information, but it certainly shouldn't be the headline. And any promotional messaging should, of course, always be relevant to the target audience's challenges and requirements. So I think an effective piece of content marketing should ultimately leave the audience more informed and engaged on the topic in question. They may not necessarily be ready to start a dialogue yet, but you've taken that first step towards building trust and, of course, brand awareness. But I think it's important to note that there's no silver bullet when it comes to building trust with your target audience. It takes time. And a patient, considered approach is really what's required.
Yeah, and I think that trust is often overlooked. I mean, part of the demand-based technology is to give insight, intent signals when that journey starts from a prospect. They may be interested in us. They started exploring something relevant. That's way too early to give it to sales, right? That is where that trust element comes in, and getting that brand out and building the awareness and trust long before it gets to sales is often overlooked. It's a case of, I saw a signal, let's give it to sales. So I think you put the nail on the head there. That trust with an audience is so important. And then the earlier you can gain that trust, the more chance you've got of being successful going forward.
Yeah, you can't do anything without it. It's integral. The temptation is always to kind of push for those conversions, but without building the trust, you just can't get to that point. So it is, it's really, really is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And for obviously a lot of companies who'll be listening to this, it's a bit of a mind shift. So I think we all agree that any sort of change in a business is challenging. So when you're first starting maybe this shift in content strategies, maybe you're in a traditional B2B setting and you're trying to do something different. What kind of resistance did you face when you did it, and you think other people will face? And how did you approach it?
So I first started kind of working on this stuff. I moved from, as I mentioned in my intro, I moved from that sort of pure editorial journalism background into brand journalism, content marketing, whatever you want to call it. I made that move almost 10 years ago now. And back in those days, it was very different to how it is now. So I think when I first started working with B2B brands on their content marketing strategies, the mindset within many organizations was that the focus must be on promoting particular products or service offerings with little or no consideration to the bigger picture in terms of the audience's challenges or even the wider industry or macroeconomic context. As I say, coming from an editorial background, I was keen to emphasize the importance of storytelling over jumping straight into the hard sell. So it's about finding the human stories that sort of pulse beneath the surface of big corporations. And by finding that emotive human connection, I think it's possible to start building that trust. And once you've built that trust, it's much easier to start taking your audience further down the funnel, as we say, to a point where they're ready to start talking to you in a meaningful way that can lead to new business.
Yeah, absolutely. And did you feel that the resistance that you got is similar to what other people would face, or from a business perspective?
Do you mean when I started out or now?
Yeah. So you want to change your strategy and get that trust element in it rather than the promotional element. But did you get pushback from the business?
A little bit. I think some were more sort of receptive than others. The companies that we tended to work with back then were obviously the fact that they were working with us. They did understand, or at least they kind of thought they understood why it was important. So, I think that the pushback from those businesses was probably not so much. Obviously, the companies we were working with were huge. So there might be people within the marketing teams or comms teams that totally got it. But those people maybe working in sales or solutions or operations maybe took a bit more convincing that, it's not just about trying to put a product or service in front of someone and expecting them to kind of, want to start a conversation. You have to find that hook. And that's where kind of storytelling comes in. What's the hook? Why should they care? What are they getting out of it? And then you can start to build from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And we hear lots of conversations, right? We want to be a much more account focused approach or whatever. And then sales push back because all they want is more leads. And actually you don't want more leads. You want better quality leads. And so, if you're bringing in companies that have understood and trust your brand, and we're bringing those people into the funnel rather than just hitting anyone and everyone, it's going to be much more successful for them. And sometimes that resistance is something that you just have to do it and prove it. Yeah. We see that a lot.
Absolutely.
So that all makes sense. So from a practical perspective, and again, based on your own experiences, how does putting the focus on identifying challenges rather than just pitching solutions change the way we should think about content creation in these big organizations?
So I think it enables brands to amplify the issues and the topics that matter to their target audience, thus enabling brands to talk directly to the people that they actually want to engage with. So essentially it's about substance over slogans. And I think by adopting an editorial instead of a, say, advertorial approach to content creation, you start to build up a bank of content assets that are of genuine interest to your audience. And this applies to all formats of content. It could be long, short form, written articles, case studies, videos, landing pages, the works really. And when it comes to putting this approach into action, the first crucial step is to make sure you understand the full picture. And this involves analyzing context, data, nuance, and applying a journalist mindset to unearth the story that matters most to the target audience and hence moves the needle on your brand.
Yeah, and I think your journalistic background is probably gives you those skills to go and identify those problems that maybe a traditional marketer maybe wouldn't have. So definitely a good use of previous history, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
So obviously, with all the onset of AI and all this sort of stuff, things are changing. But I believe, and I'm sure you do as well, that people are still the heart of creative industry and content, that sort of stuff. So what is it about the human stories that make them so powerful in a corporate context? And, using your journalistic skills, how do you go about actually uncovering them in these big companies?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think just because you're in a B2B environment doesn't mean your audience isn't interested in stories with a human element. And I think actually that's quite the opposite case. I think after all, human stories connect us all. Uncovering those human stories can take a little bit of digging. But often when you scratch below the surface, you quickly start to uncover a wealth of potential storytelling collateral. I honestly believe this, but behind every product or service offering, there is a benefit to an end user, obviously. And it could be a banking solution that protects vulnerable customers against, say, fraud, for example, or providing high-speed broadband to remote parts of the world. The key is to ask the right questions of the subject matter experts within big companies to get to the bottom of the what, and the why. And I think that the best way to uncover these stories is to engage with as wide a base of stakeholders within the organization as possible. So that could be salespeople, operations leaders, solutions experts, different job roles look at the same issue, but with a very different perspective often. And it's these different perspectives that can form really powerful and engaging stories. And at the end of the day, everyone has got a story to tell. It could be this is getting a bit extreme, but it could be, everyone from the cleaner to the CEO. Everyone has got a story to tell. And the craft is uncovering the golden nuggets that can form the basis of a really compelling story that will resonate with your target audience.
Yeah, I think that's so right. And you need to be a storyteller from a sales perspective, but you need to know what story you're telling. And I think the word you used, which I use pretty much every conversation I have with my sales team, is why.
Yeah.
Understanding the why behind stuff. Why do you want to do this? What's the actual issue you're trying to achieve? Why is that important to you? Is so important. And it's the same. If you don't understand the why, you might tell a story, but if you don't understand the reason behind it, it's not as compelling. So I definitely agree.
Yeah. Yeah. I subscribe to the sort of the 5 whys approach, which does annoy salespeople a lot of the time. And it's, if someone is requesting a content asset, a blog, for example, well, why do you want it? I want it because it's going to help me, drive sales with this particular organization. Well, why do you think that? And the more you drill down into the why, you eventually get to the root cause of actually why I want to do it and how we can position it in a way that will be effective.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So we often get people say, I want to buy some data from you. So, why do you want to do that? Well, because we need more data. Well, why do you need more data? Because our pipeline's full of rubbish. Well, why would buying more data solve that? And then, as you say, you then dig into what the real problems are. So yeah, definitely agree with that. So from your perspective then, how do you go about adopting an audience-focused mindset when you're creating content? And are there any particular operational shifts that you need to make sure this is successful?
Yeah, so I think obviously getting under the skin of your audience is obviously, very important. Research your audience personas and establish their particular pain points and intent signals up front. Obtaining top level buy-in for the concept is again very important. You need everyone pulling in the same direction, or else your objective is just doomed to failure. I think once you've done that, your brand conversation should reflect 4 key aspects, and those are sort of the first one being around honesty. So content should always deliver an honest and clear reflection of the thoughts and values of the organization. And the second one is connection. So a good way of building a connection is showing your audience how you've delivered in a similar situation. So case studies and testimonials from within your organization are a really powerful way of building a connection with your audience. The third one is value. So your messaging needs to offer genuine insights that resonate with the audience. And finally, the fourth point would be around reliability. So you should never initiate a conversation unless you intend to maintain that conversation. And this last point emphasizes the need for sort of what we call a drumbeat approach to content distribution. So doing it in isolation doesn't really work. If you're committed to it, you have to maintain it. And that could be, anything from sort of regular social posts, regular blog updates, making sure your microsite is refreshed and up to date, attending events on a regular basis. Without that drumbeat approach, you are going to struggle with your content marketing strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of this stuff, it takes time, right? And at the same time, we're all under pressure to hit numbers and things like that. So have you found a way to balance the need for that authentic audience first content we're all talking about alongside the pressure to hit the goals, maybe from a promotional perspective you often hear?
Yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't think the two are mutually exclusive. As we sort of talked about earlier, I think the best way to achieve lower funnel success, in terms of SQLs, is through that strict, steady drumbeat of human-centric content. It's the only way really you can drive meaningful long-term engagement with those key audience personas. So I don't think it's a case of balancing audience first content with hitting promotional goals. It's more a case of making the development of quality audience first content a central component of your strategy for delivering results for sales stakeholders.
Yeah, makes sense. And I'm assuming there's going to be people on the call or on the podcast at the moment thinking, this is something I'd like to get started with. Is there a cultural shift needed here? And if there is, where would you say they should start? And once they've got going, how do they keep that momentum going?
Yeah, so I think back when I started this, it was more of an unknown. And I think now, 2025, most large organizations these days do understand the need for content marketing. But I do think a lot of those companies are putting the cart before the horse in a way. But before investing in a content marketing program, it's important to first ascertain what success looks like. So whether it's boosting brand awareness, delivering lower funnel connections, or to be honest, as is usually the case, it's a combination of both. Once you've established what success looks like, then attention to turn to the audience. So who are we targeting and how do we want to engage with them? More often than not, the answers revolve around human-centric content that gets to the root of particular pain points or opportunities. What has changed since 2017 or whenever it was I started is the development of technology. And we talked about, you mentioned AI, leveraging AI and LLM tools like ChatGPT has become, it's no longer a nice to have. It's a must have. And it's really important to start thinking in those terms when we talk about content marketing. So being able to maximize output from these tools has become a real differentiator. So for example, it's really important to understand how to tailor your prompts when using things like ChatGPT to uncover the best results in terms of, everything from sort of campaign strategy to content development and audience targeting. And it's something that we take quite seriously at Firstsource, which is where I am now. I think ultimately success depends, it lives or dies, on buy-in from leaders outside of marketing. So without the support of sales, solutions and operational teams, it really is extremely difficult to kickstart and maintain a content marketing program. So that is quite crucial. And I think the final thing to say on the point is just patience is really important. So campaigns rarely deliver instant results. It does take time, as we say, to build trust, and for that to translate down into meaningful outcomes for the business.
Yeah, AI. Everyone obviously always talks about the topic of AI. It's here to stay, and it's revolutionizing the world. I mean, one of the interesting things we see a lot is sales, particularly. I speak to sales leaders often, losing a little bit of confidence in AI because often AI is driving their sales teams to go after things that in reality aren't real, and so like to term it AI without the why. If AI says go and do that, but it can't give you the why behind it, start not to trust it. I think that's what's happening. And I'm assuming in creative circles as well, as you're building content, if AI is building something that's not quite as you expected it to be, or doesn't actually hit the mark like you want, there's a bit of a confidence issue there.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. When I first started using it or looking into it in my previous role, it was still kind of in its infancy. And I did notice a lot of issues with the technology. For example, we trialed it on a blog for a client, and we noticed that a lot of the quotes that were being pulled out were completely fictional, obviously caused by what's known as hallucinations. And it was an issue because, you can't submit a piece of content that's full of just falsehoods and inaccuracies. So that was something to keep an eye on. I think as time has gone by, that's kind of been ironed out to a large extent. Where you can minimize those issues is just around how you use the technology. So the kind of the prompts that you use, the information that you're submitting to platforms like ChatGPT to kind of drive the results. So you can kind of influence what you're receiving. But on your point around kind of like the creativity side of things, I totally agree. I think it will never completely replace the human element of content. There's something about human creativity that AI, I don't think can ever really replace. So it's about kind of merging the two. And by doing that, I think you can create quite a powerful proposition. But it's certainly interesting times for sure.
Yeah. We use AI agents a lot to take away all those manual time-consuming tasks. So it leaves sales and marketing to do sales and marketing, which is what we really want to do. And I think as long as AI stays in its lane like that, I think we'll all still have jobs in the future. That's the important thing.
Yeah, let's hope so.
So the proof of the pudding, I always say, is in the eating. And as you evaluate, your past and where you are now, would you say is the boldest brand move you've made that maybe people doubted at the beginning?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there's been a few that I've been sort of involved in down the years. I think one thing that I'm quite excited about at the moment, it's something that's kind of we're spearheading at Firstsource at the moment, and it's a brand move around what we're calling, or the tagline is un-BPO, and it's essentially a sort of a transformative shift away from traditional outsourcing models. So it's a bit of a deviation from where we've previously been. And it's all about embracing the power of digital innovation, so being what we call an inch wide and a mile deep in terms of that really deep domain expertise, and fostering kind of collaboration over silos. It's still relatively early days in terms of the rollout of BPO. I think the early signs in terms of the response from both our clients and analysts has been really quite promising. And I think the reason I mention it is I think it is a bold move for a BPO organization. And yeah, it kind of reflects the mindset within the company to sort of think a little bit differently and potentially upset the apple cart a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's important, right? It's too easy to say me too and just go along with what everyone else helps. And I think if that is the case, you end up all being bucketed in the same. You all do the same thing in the same way, and it ends up becoming, whether we like it or not, you get into that price war of who can be the cheapest. And I think, similar to yourself, there's differences between what your business does and your competitors do.
Yeah.
And you need to be able to, explain and enhance those differences. Otherwise, as I say, you just get bucketed into a Dutch auction, which none of us want to be in.
Yeah, exactly.
So you mentioned AI. Just out of interest, do you use it day to day? Is there a particular example you could share with us where it helps?
Yeah, I do. I didn't used to, but it is a big focus at the moment. And I wouldn't say I was skeptical. Perhaps I was when I started out, maybe in my earlier career, but I'm a big advocate now. Use it, for everything from sort of very basic tasks like drafting social posts. Not that I do a huge amount of that, but that's an example. Recently, I used it for creating sort of like a campaign update. So refreshing an existing campaign that I've been working on to explore new messaging themes and explore new, sort of a wider target audience. And I was honestly amazed at what I got back. The detail and the sort of the relevance of what I received was really quite astonishing. I ran it past my sales stakeholder who I'm working with on this particular campaign, and I presented it to him. And I didn't take credit. I told him up front that it was the result of AI, but obviously I'd spelled out exactly what I wanted. I'd listed all the relevant prompts, and he was equally just amazed. And he wants to run with it. I mean, he's got a few comments to make on some of the points, but yeah, he more or less thinks it's good to go. So that's a recent example, but I am using it more and more, and I think the sort of the opportunities are just quite staggering, really. So yeah, I would fully recommend.
Yeah, I was at an event a couple of weeks ago, and I spoke to a founder, and I said, just give me your elevator pitch, and it was amazing. And I said, well, that's one of the best pitches I've ever had. He said, yeah, I take no credit. It was all done on AI. So it worked. It works. And if it works, why not use it? That's what I think.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. So you sound like someone who probably consumes lots of content. Is there a particular book, a blog, podcast, newsletter, or anything like that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Yeah. So that's a good question. I subscribe to Seth Godin's daily blog, which I think probably a lot of people do, and I'm a big fan. It's really snackable, really thought provoking. There's another blog, a guy called Neil Patel, whose blog I find really useful when I'm looking for ideas, some tips to enhance things like SEO, and just other kind of general digital marketing advice. A book that I could recommend was actually written by the founder of my former employer. It's a book called Powerful B2B Content, and it was written by a lady called Gay Flashman, who was the founder, CEO of my former company. And there's just loads of really good advice in there for anyone interested in kind of getting started with content marketing. So yeah, I guess those would be the three that I just off the top of my head that I'd kind of pull out.
Excellent. Well, I'm sure people listening will be checking those out. So thank you for that. You've been a really good guest, Callum. So I'm going to be cheeky here and ask, have you got any inspirational people in B2B that you think we should invite to the show in the future?
Yeah. So, it's a toughie. So the two people that I mentioned, Gay would be really engaging, and I think she'd have a lot of really good stuff to say about her story on content marketing and where she's kind of taking it. Neil, likewise, would probably be someone that I'd certainly be interested in hearing from. Without wanting to sound like a suck up, our CMO is a guy called Aniket Mendaka, and he's kind of been the spearhead for what we're doing in terms of AI within marketing here at Firstsource. He's got some really interesting perspectives on how we can use it and kind of what the future holds. Yeah, I think he would probably be someone that would be interesting to hear from for sure.
Excellent. Well, I don't think we've had any of them on the show, so look out for them in the future. Hopefully we'll get them on as guests going forward. This has been really informative, and we've dug into quite a bit of stuff. But if there's any listeners that want, more detail or further questions, how would you recommend people get in touch to you after the podcast?
So I'm on LinkedIn, like everyone. So yeah, I guess that would probably be the best way to reach out if anyone was interested.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, Callum, it's been a really informative, useful session. And I think we probably only scratched the surface. We could definitely get a follow-up session, one around the content, but also around your journalist background. I saw you've got some great stories we can share. But for now,
absolutely.
Thanks for your time. And everyone who's listening, thank you for taking the time to listen to this. There's plenty more episodes. I think they're coming up for 600 now in total. So please check them out. And in the meantime, thanks everyone for listening. Thanks again, Callum, for joining. Until the next time, cheerio.
Thank you.